Upside down philosopher here, folks. So, ego. This is something that we deal with a lot without defining too much. So, I'm going to get into the three main definitions of ego and kind of how they fit together. So, the first one, self-conception, who you think you are. This will be one of the pages if you look up ego on Wikipedia. So all things have boundaries, and all living things have to have open boundaries, or they would die. Your body has to be able to breathe, your skin has to be able to breathe. Any living system has to have open boundaries to an extent, but it has to protect those openings. And similarly, a healthy self-conception, a healthy ego, is going to have strength and be able to protect itself without being overactive or over defensive. Next definition, self-esteem or self-worth. So this is sort of the surface aspect of how we often use ego. And typically it seems to me we say someone's ego is too big. And it seems to me that quantity isn't quite enough here. I was thinking about this as I was watching the basketball finals because you had these two teams, the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers. And the Warriors play way better as a team. And the Cavaliers have this superstar player called LeBron James, who has a huge ego. Calls himself King James, took the number 23, even though that was the best player of all time's number. What else? All kinds of things. And but if you were driving a bus, you want to know how big the bus is. You don't want to pretend it's a car. So he would be right to think that he's a big deal to the NBA, to think that he's a big deal on a team. If he's being double teamed, triple teamed since high school, he would be right to think that he's that good. He would be right to think that he brings in that much money and earns that much money in the current system. So let's say you're looking at this guy and you wish you could be a better team player and win more championships on his next team. Is it really the size of the ego? Does he need to shrink his ego, or does he need to find out how qualitatively to fit into a team and to find out what his place is? And then so now, third thing is the historical origin of our use of ego. This was a translator's choice. So Sigmund Freud wrote in German, and he used German pronouns, and he wrote about das Ich and das Es, which would be directly translated into English as the I and the it. So he was relating this experience of part of me is like an I, and part of me is like an it, an unconscious thing. And this funny thing happened over time. So this translator chose to use the word ego, and now the way that we use ego, we tend to say my ego this, my ego that. We use ego in the third person, so it almost sounds more like the it. That doesn't mean that we should try to restore or recover Freud's theories, because they are definitely outdated. He was an important pioneer. He over-sexualized everything, as many of you know, including the ego. He attributed the formation of the ego to the repression of the Oedipus complex. So in other words, wanting to sleep with your mom if you're a boy, or with your dad if you're a girl. Right, so we don't need to bring back Freud, but I do think that that's interesting, and I think that it is very important to recognize that when we say ego, often we do mean an unconscious part of ourselves. So I think that a useful definition of ego would be the combination of self-esteem, self-conception, and our defenses of those two, our unconscious defenses of those two. So when we defend ourselves unconsciously via the ego, a funny thing happens, which is that you might say the ego can completely hijack our rational mind. So we can say all kinds of things that we believe are 100% reasonable and rational, and really it might not be true. And it doesn't matter how many PhDs you have, it doesn't matter what your IQ is, it doesn't matter if you're famous. This is human nature. I've alluded to this a little bit in another video, but again, the ego will hijack rationality, often to defend against things that we don't want to know. It could be theories we don't want to know. It could be truths about ourselves that we don't want to know, or a combination of the two. So I'm going to leave you with that, folks. Take care. See you next time.